notre départ est proche. Merci de vous asseoir.
See, this is why I don't check bags. My bag was not on the plane from Paris, so I had to wait for another bag, the next plane to come in to Marrakesh. So I've just been standing here for, an hour waiting for my bag to come. But my air tech says it's here now, so slowly but surely. Okay, as you know, I have wrapped up my Morocco content, but I just had to come in here and talk about the Delta Air France code sharing gone wrong, okay? It kicked off my trip on a rough and rocky road to Marrakesh from Atlanta. So I want to tell you about how the start of my Marrakesh trip took an unfortunate turn with the debacles of code sharing, issues around credit card needed and double bookings, and then not to mention then my bag got left behind. So let's get into today's video so I can talk about each of these things and then tell you tips on how you can avoid these situations as well. So let's get into today's video. If you're new here, welcome. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's free for you to do so. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. Now let's get into today's video. So first, let me go over the code sharing confusion, okay? So code sharing is when airlines in different regions are a part of the same overall company or network, and you can book flights on one airline and fly with the other. So in this case, Delta Airlines is a US airline. They are part of the SkyTeam Alliance. The SkyTeam Alliance touches airlines around the globe. So that means you can book a flight with Delta here in the US and end up flying on Air France or Air Europa and countless other airlines around the globe. So since I was flying to Marrakesh, the route that I chose was flying through Paris. Therefore, I picked a code share with Air France. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I have flown to Paris a few times on Air France. But I quickly remembered when going through this, I booked directly through Air France and then put my SkyMiles number in there so I could receive my rewards at Delta. I never booked directly through Delta to fly Air France. So Delta didn't operate any of the flights during my travels to and from Morocco. And there's no direct flight from here to Marrakesh. So I had to fly through somewhere else to get there. So that leads me to Paris and flying Air France. So that's the code sharing and what it is. Now what happened? So I had booked my flight at the end of 2022 because I was trying to get my perks and all that stuff. And I booked my flight, and of course there's flight changes and all of that. And so at some point, way before travel, I can't remember exactly when, but I got a notification that one of the flights, I think the flight from Paris back to Atlanta was canceled, or something was canceled, and I wasn't gonna make, it must have been the flight from Marrakesh to Paris, because I wasn't gonna make the flight back to Atlanta. So they put me on a flight from Marrakesh to Detroit, and then Detroit to Atlanta. I'm like, that's crazy work. Like, why am I flying to Detroit and then to Atlanta? Like, let's just change the whole route or whole schedule so I can just get directly back to Atlanta. So I got on the text messaging chat with Delta, which is usually very helpful, which they were helpful in this instance. And I talked to the attendant. I made sure I still had the class of seats that I had purchased and booked with, and discussed that I needed to be put on this earlier flight from Marrakesh to Paris and then catch that flight from Paris to Atlanta directly. So they fixed it, and I see that on the Delta app, and I see it in Air France application. On the phone app and on the website, it says that I am flying from Atlanta to Paris, Paris to Marrakesh, and then to return Marrakesh to Paris, Paris to Atlanta. 24 hours in advance, I go to check in for my flight. And I couldn't, but I was like, that's cool, because a lot of times when you fly internationally, you can't really check in advance. So I was like, whatever. That just prompted me to get to the airport an hour earlier than expected. I get to the airport and I get to the counter at Air France, and the representative was like, do you have the card that you booked the trip with? And I was like, OMG. I almost left that credit card at home because it's American Express. And as most travelers know, if you have American Express, it doesn't really work anywhere outside the US, so why carry it? So I usually don't carry it with me all the time when I go out of the country, because why? And I needed to show it as proof that I was on this flight. I'm like, y'all need to send a specific email that says you must have the credit card that you booked this trip with when you go to the airport to check in. And I have a lot of questions around this because my friend who was flying to Morocco at the same time was flying out of Detroit. The same thing, she booked with Delta flying Air France. She did not have her American Express credit card and had to rebook her flight. And I have questions because what if your employer books your flight and that happens? Or what if your spouse books that flight, or a family member and they're not going? What if your card got stolen, you had to get a new one? There are so many different things or reasons why you would not have that same card that you booked the flight with. But just make sure you take the credit card, period, that you booked your travel with when you go anywhere at this point. I even talked about it on Instagram, and someone commented that she was still fighting the airline about it because she booked with points and had to rebook using her card and had to pay for it. So imagine you use points to book a flight and you didn't pay anything, and then you get to the counter and now you gotta pay with cash. Then the second issue, so we get past the credit card, luckily I had it. We get past the credit card issue and he's not able to check me in. I'm calm because I just know I'm getting on this flight to Marrakesh, or well, to Paris, then to Marrakesh. He asked me, like, was there an issue with the flight schedule? So I explained what I told you all just now. Well, the person I talked to didn't fully cancel it in the system. So I couldn't see that there was a second flight booked for me on the return. So there was still that flight that went from Paris to Detroit and Detroit to Atlanta that was still booked somewhere behind the scenes in their system that I couldn't see on the front end. And there was the flight that I was planning to take from Paris directly to Atlanta. I was double booked on 2 flights, didn't know. And they couldn't check me in because I can't be on 2 flights at the same time. And the representative, he had to call so many people. He called people like at the corporate office. He had to call people over to the booth. Finally, a person comes over who I guess experienced this before, and they were able to, I don't know if they rebooked or what they did, because they went over to another computer, but they came over and they printed out the itinerary. They had me confirm each of the routes and my seats, and they got rid of that second flight I was booked on. What a mess. So luckily they were able to fix it. I don't even know what kind of tip I could give you for that. I would just say, if you do have a flight schedule change like that, I would, after you get it fixed, if you have to, because you know, a lot of times they do rebook you, but if there's something where you have to get it changed, call back again, maybe a few weeks later, to confirm a second that one that you changed from doesn't still exist. So like I mentioned, I had to fly through Paris. I had to fly through Charles de Gaulle, which I love Paris. Paris is my favorite city in the world, but I do not like Charles de Gaulle. I don't know how people complain about all these other airports like Atlanta, because Atlanta, if you know how to read, I don't understand. Charles de Gaulle can be messy, can be very messy. The last time I flew out of Charles de Gaulle, I got there 3 hours early, and I needed every single minute of the 3 hours because it was just chaotic. And I think I went into the lounge and got a croissant, and that was it. And it was fortunate my flight was delayed because if it wasn't delayed, I don't know if I would have made my flight. This time flying through Paris, I had to check a bag. And mind you, I flew Delta One or whatever the equivalent is in Air France, but I booked the, the lay flat seats. And I had checked a bag because I took more clothes than I usually do because it's hot in Marrakesh. I'm like, I need to have additional outfits because I sweat a lot. Also, we were going to different climates, and then I was like, well, I don't really like to buy a lot of things when I travel, but I hear like people usually buy a lot of things in Morocco, so I was like, let me carry this bag. I have an AirTag in my bag, an Apple AirTag, which this is the first time I actually had to use the Apple AirTag for a reason. Usually I just check it just to check it, and my luggage is with me. But I boarded the flight in Paris to go to Marrakesh. When I boarded the flight, my Apple AirTag, it said the bag was with me, meaning it was there. It was in the vicinity of that airplane. I didn't check it again because I was like, okay. So I'm sitting on the plane, and they make an announcement, which I didn't realize like this would probably happen to me or what was going on. They make this announcement and they said, oh, we have to pull a few people's bags off the plane because they're not on this flight. Okay. But I was on the flight, so I was like, that's not me. So we land in Marrakesh. There are 3 other people with me, and we're over there. We had fast track at the airport, so luckily we did because the representative in the fast track helped me. The baggage claim thing stops, and my bag never comes off. I had to go file a claim. The guy, it was a whole thing. The guy was kind of like acting like he had a bad day. He put the wrong email address on my claim, which you need to have in order that you have to have that claim email to pick up your bag in Marrakesh. But eventually when my phone caught up to where I was located, I opened my Apple AirTag and it said my bag was still in Paris, France. But fortunately, it had boarded the next flight. I had to stay at the airport because I was like, I don't want to have to come back out. So I just stayed there and waited for my bag to arrive on the next flight, which fortunately it did. And I was able to claim it there in Marrakesh. So with that said, airlines lose bags and forget bags all the time. What you need to make sure you do is always make sure you carry some extra things on you. So an extra outfit, extra undergarments, toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, stuff like that. You don't have to carry the whole wardrobe, but that. And also make sure you take a photo or video of the belongings inside your luggage. So if you do have to make a claim because the airline loses it, you can discuss what you had in the bag, because then they need to reimburse you for things you need to purchase to survive while you're on your trip. And then having some type of tracking device on your luggage is great, because if they weren't able to locate it, then I would have been like, no, it still says it's in this concourse to whatever it was. I think it was 2F, I believe, in Paris, France. But fortunately, I did end up getting my bag. Sometimes that doesn't work for everyone. Okay, so let's recap this Delta Air France code sharing debacle. Now, Delta is my favorite airline here in the US. I'm gonna still fly them. I did, tag them in my post of my dissatisfaction. But I must say the Delta Air France code share is messy. I would avoid, if possible, if I am on Delta's website and I see that the entire trip is operated by Air France, I would try to avoid that, to avoid this code sharing mess in the future, because it seems like that's what triggered all of these issues. And like I said, I would still just make sure I always take the credit card I purchase my travels with and have it on me, even if I'm going to use it or not. And I would make sure I would have essential belongings with me in a carry-on bag, just in case my bag gets left behind, delayed or lost. and having a tracking device in that bag. And of course, making sure I take a photo or video of what's inside of my check bag, and making sure if there's any significant changes and you talk to an agent and they change it, to call back and confirm they made all those changes, because what you see on the front end may not always be what's happening on the back end. So if you enjoyed this video and these tips and my story time, please make sure you hit that like button. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It is free for you to do so and helps me provide more and better content to you in the future. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. Make sure you share this video with your friends, family, and social media networks. And if you enjoyed this video and would love to leave me a little tip, you can hit the thanks button down below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day or night wherever in the world you are. Bye.